Hello, rock stars. Matt Vanderbo here. Hey, are you a composer that makes music with some type of orchestral element that you have to play through your keyboard via a MIDI virtual instrument? If so, you've probably discovered the biggest downfall to MIDI instruments, and that is that no matter how good the virtual instrument is, it will never replicate a real life performance of someone standing in front of a microphone. If you've discovered this shortcoming, then you are not alone. And if you stick with me for a few minutes, I will tell you how you can make your virtual instruments sound like you had a real player or a real orchestra standing in front of you. So stick with me, ladies and gentlemen, and let's dive in. No matter how good a virtual instrument is, it's always going to sound stilted or fake. Now, let's talk about virtual instruments themselves. These are real performances played by some of the best players in the world. So when you play a MIDI virtual instrument, say a trumpet or a trombone or a violin or whatever, you are actually playing the real sound of a live player. However, most virtual instruments are recorded one note at a time. And granted, they're recorded in every type of articulation and volume increment that you can imagine. So there's probably thousands and thousands of one-note samples within each virtual instrument. However, when you try to string them together on your own, it's going to sound extremely stilted because you are playing one isolated note after another isolated note. It's the same thing that we used to hear on automated telephone systems. Now, I don't know if AI has replaced this stuff or not, but it used to be that when you would call somewhere and you'd press in a number, you'd get this robot voice that would say, "You have dialed 8694257," and it'd just be this really weird robotic sound because all of those numbers were recorded individually and then arranged in haphazard formation, and there was just no natural cadence to take you from one word to the next. Same is true of the virtual instruments we play on a keyboard. We're playing individual notes and then hoping we can string them together into what sounds like a real performance, but it's really not. No matter how good you are, it's going to be extremely hard to make an authentic sounding performance when you're playing things one note at a time. So how do you solve this problem? Well, it's quite simple, really. However, it's harder to put into practice. But the answer to your problem is to add one real live performance to every track that includes a lot of MIDI stuff. Now, not every style of music is going to necessitate this. For example, hip hop and EDM, there's rarely ever real live instruments in those styles, and so we don't need to worry about it so much there. However, in things like your orchestral stuff, your funk, anything with a lot of horn stabs or brass, or if you've got emotional stuff with violins, you are going to want to employ this trick. Hey, we need to add one live performance on top of the MIDI. There's a weird psychological trick that happens in a listener's brain that when we hear one live element in a song, we assume that everything else was real and live as well. It doesn't matter if you only have one real trumpet part and everything else underneath it is a bunch of MIDI stuff played out of your keyboard. The listener doesn't know that because they hear the real performance up here and assume that everything else was real too. So we really only need to have one real performance. Now, if you are watching this channel because you want to make a go at being a composer, it's probably because you are a musician and play an instrument of some sort. Now, I could be wrong, but this is a guess on my part. You've probably been an instrumentalist at some point in time. So whatever instrument you came up on, just start adding that, okay? For me, I was a trumpet player. I started playing in 4th grade, went all through high school playing trumpet. I went to college on a trumpet scholarship and continued playing all through grad school. I was a marching band nerd all the way through Boise State Blue Thunder Marching Band, baby. And in fact, I still play the trumpet. I'm a volunteer orchestra member at a local community musical theater. And once or twice a year, I sit in the orchestra pit and play things like The Sound of Music or Seussical the Musical. I just have a ball doing it. And because I'm a trumpet player, anytime I need real trumpet on my music, I break out old Trusty here and just let it rip. No matter how good you are at articulating things and programming MIDI virtual instruments, you will never be able to create the sound of a real player. Things like little trills like that. You can't do that on here. Maybe you can, but it's going to take a hell of a lot of effort. So what I can do here in about 2 seconds, good luck. It's probably going to take you 30 minutes to do that on a keyboard and getting out your pencil tool and messing with articulations. I just played something that took me all of 2 seconds. You are going to be extremely hard pressed to ever capture what I just did live over here on the keyboard. So whatever your instrument is, I would encourage you to just set up a microphone or plug the cord in and record a real performance. Don't settle for MIDI if you have access to real. Now you might be saying, well, Matt, I don't actually have any instruments or I don't play any instruments, so where does that leave me? I'm glad you asked. So like I said, I volunteer at the local community music theater, and I've been doing this for 10 to 12 years now, and during those years, I've made some really good friends down there, and I will occasionally bring them over to my house and record them here, right here, where I'm sitting. Most recently, I had a trombone player over who played tenor trombone and bass trombone for me, and it sounded awesome. I've brought over violin players, I've brought over cello players, I've brought over flute players, or flautists, I believe is the technical term. You get the idea. You are going to have people in your life that play musical instruments. Bring them over to your house, okay? We're not going to talk about the legalities of that in this video, but there is a whole handful of considerations you need to think about, like work for hire documents. We'll talk about that in another video. For now, just be on the hunt for real players. Your neighbor across the street might be a closet cellist, okay? So just see if you can bring them over. These players don't need to be virtuosos. They don't even need to be that good. They just need to be a real player. All right, and all we're going to do is we're going to record a performance. We are going to layer it on top of our MIDI, and then the whole thing is going to take on this real sound. If you don't play in the orchestra and none of your neighbors are musicians, then I would recommend going to your local university or community college. Now, every university is going to have a music program. Some community colleges will, not all. But if they do, I want you to go down there with a flyer that says, musicians wanted, paying $20 for your work in a studio. You word that however you want. And maybe that brings some people in, maybe it doesn't. If it doesn't, then I would recommend reaching out to the music professors and saying, hey, can I come into your classroom and make the case to your students that I need to hire people to perform on my music? I bet you dollars to donuts that any music professor would be like, this is awesome. What an opportunity for my students. Not only could they actually get some studio experience, but they might actually have their performance on a TV show, and they're going to make a little money along the way. I know if I was that music professor, I would be like, yes, come on in. So there are options out there to find these players, but whatever you have to do to find them, just know that it is worth the search, because all of a sudden your stilted one-note performances on the keyboard are going to take on this incredible lifelike air, and it really only takes one live performance on top of all the fake stuff to make that happen. So I hope you got something from this video, and I hope there's some valuable lessons in here for you if you make any type of music that has some type of live element that you have up until now been playing entirely through the keyboard. So with this little trick, I hope you can run all the way to the bank to make the most realistic sounding music possible so you can make that music, get those placements, and make that money, baby. Let's go!